sort of whole new world of and the new frontier of online reputation, it's exciting to know that we can actually wrestle back control. And that's why in all of our discussions with Sam and the FIveBlocks team, we thought that it was a really great idea to connect, create a partnership so that we can bring some of these services to our clients in Australia. So Sam's been doing this for 10, 15 years. And so I think he's got it pretty right now. And we've had some fantastic conversations with him yesterday about, oh, wow, you can do that. Oh, wow, you know this. So we've been learning a lot about it and doing a lot of professional development in the last couple of days. And so it's very exciting to be able to share this with you guys today, and hopefully that you'll take away some learnings, some insights, and also if you think, hey, this is really something that we should really look into. Sam's here for another couple of days and is around and more than happy to come and have a chat one-on-one with you guys or any of your colleagues. So without any further ado, I would like to invite Sam to share some insights about the new frontiers of online reputation management.
Thank
you.
you. Thanks. Good morning. I want to start with an example of work that we do and the challenges that we face. And so we were approached about 7 months ago by a PR firm that we work with in the United States. And they said, we may have a client for you, a food brand, and I won't use the name of the brands we work with because not everyone wants to share what they're doing in reputation management. And this was a food brand, very popular in the United States, that has been growing all the time, and actually didn't have real issues, but had some concerns because they're expanding. They were in the East Coast or in the West Coast of the United States, and they're trying to expand to the middle. And there were some concerns about the healthfulness of the food, as there always is with food brands. And so they came to us and they said, "Can you help us kind of manage this? People think this light is bright. In the spotlight, it's tough. Okay, wait, okay, I'm okay now." All right. So people are always concerned about healthfulness of food, and so they said we're kind of concerned because we're going to go do a lot of marketing. We're going to go to new distributors we haven't worked with, and our name brand is good and people like us. But these new distributors and maybe people from other countries that are looking into the brand and new media and local, they know. I mean, you do this, right? You look on Google and your eye goes right away to the most controversial piece of information you can find, regardless of the source. And so they were concerned about this. And a launch in a new location could be many millions of dollars. They're going to do test marketing and everything. So they really want to have all their kind of ducks in a row. They want to have everything set up properly. So the PR firm says, we've got a whole plan for them, but we need to make sure that it comes out in digital as well. What can you do? So we said, we had a meeting with the client, and what we found was that they actually have all the right pieces. They've created a mini site that tells the truth about what is helpful about what they're doing and gives all the facts. They have social media properties and social media engagement that is actually working, and there are people that really like this and they're talking about it, and it's all true and it makes sense and everything. And there's great media, and what the challenge is for many of our companies, your companies, is how do we make sure that is the content people see and that they see it in the right light and they see enough of it. And so the program we set up for them was to say, let's take the content that was already created together with your PR, that's already out there, that's been covered in the media, and let's see how we can make sure that it has the visibility that it needs to have. And so that's kind of like, in a nutshell, the way we approach these situations. And what happened was over the course of the first 3 or 4 months, we were able to take the mini site that they had and help them by doing on-page optimization of it and using some of the tactics of SEO, but also a much wider view of digital reputation that says we don't care just about one article or one website, we care about the whole picture and the impression people get about the brand. We were able to take the good media they had received. We're able to take the social media channels, including in their case it was a Facebook page, which was really quite active, but was sitting on page 2. So from Facebook, everyone was finding it, but they weren't finding it in Google, so that was a miss. Good video that they had, and actually transform the first page of Google, which is really all important, into a portal, kind of like where the whole first page of Google was telling their story, as opposed to relying just on their own, website. And I think all of us realize that if I want to find out about your company or want to find out about an executive in your company, pretty much the last place I'm going to look is your website. The first place I'm going to look is Google, and then I'm going to poke around in Wikipedia, and I'm going to look around and see if there's an interesting news story, and then if there's anything on social media, and then I'll round up the story by looking at your website and saying, oh, and that's what they say about it. So you're one voice in the rest of the voices. Is this ringing true to people? Does this make sense? This is the way I search. No offense to anybody. I searched you all. It wasn't pretty. All right, so that's kind of like in a nutshell the way we approach problems. But I'm going to jump into just a few kind of pieces of understanding of how we see the world, and then I do want to open it up to a discussion because I don't want to tell you all about just about what we do. I kind of want to hear about some of the challenges that you're seeing in communications, and then kind of give a perspective of what's the digital reputation management kind of way of looking at it. And so to sum up what we do, we help people and brands control their digital reputation management, digital reputation to match their needs, whatever their needs are. And there's all kinds of needs, different kinds of stakeholders. So you're working with you have communications internally, you work with a PR firm externally, you have plans. We are not the people that are creating your messaging. We're the ones making sure that the signal that you're broadcasting is being received in the way that you want to. And it turns out that you think sometimes that I've created a piece of content, people are going to be consuming this piece of content just as I've created it, but in fact it's going to be consumed in the context of, almost always going to be consumed in the context of social media or search. And people are they're going to search it and they're going to see it in the context. So helping bring that context to you is going to help you tweak what you're doing in the content creation, and also make sure that it's being received in the way that you want it to kind of be broadcast. So, one of the first questions that we get is, isn't this just SEO? Isn't this just SEM? Like, isn't it really the same thing? And it is a little different. And I got my start in search engine optimization and helping websites, including web businesses that I was working on, rank at the top. People look up, I did a cellular phone business. People look up cell phones. You want to be right at the top. People look up at the time. It was, all the rage was BlackBerry, 7820. You look at that. You want to be at the top, and that's where you're going to make your sales. That is still an important part of how to market yourself online, and I wouldn't take anything away from that. SEM is saying, I want to pay to get those positions. I'm willing to pay per click, and then people will see my ad, and then they'll click through. Also, can be really important if you're trying to sell through hotel rooms or get leads for your enterprise management system or whatever it is you're trying to generate. Digital reputation management isn't talking about the top result. It's not talking about the ads. It's talking about the whole darn thing, the whole web experience. It's the experience of your brand. I look up your brand. I look up the keywords associated with your products. It's everything, I think. So it's everything from when you start typing, you get those auto suggestions. Everything from there down to the related searches at the bottom, through all the different websites I find, including everything, including how your own website appears. It's kind of the inclusive. You could say that it's kind of the evolution of SEO. And we're actually just read an article last night about that SEOs are now expanding out in this direction, because they're saying people aren't searching with one keyword anymore. They're not searching for one product. They want to learn more about your brand and how they don't do that just on your own website. So is that kind of making sense, everybody? Mm-hmm. Okay. How many people here? How many companies here are using SEO right now? They're doing some sort of SEO. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of people. And how many are doing paid advertising right now? Okay, so also kind of what I would expect, which is great. And how many people here are doing something social with their company or their own brand? Okay, awesome, that's great. And what about Wikipedia? Who here is interacting with Wikipedia? Like two or three people. That's great. So I would say that the goal is to get more in companies. I mean, companies need to be taking more advantage of, it sounds like a lot of you already are, but making sure that the efforts that you're doing in social media are bearing fruit, that they're helping you not just in social media, but also reputationally, because arguably, following on from what Liz said, if people are looking for you and they're searching into your brand, that's when you want to make sure that they're seeing that content. It's a very engaged kind of user. Whereas in social media, a lot of times it's like
your colleague or your friend mentions something, so you're kind of peeking at it. You're not actually going to make a decision right now. You're not thinking of maybe working with that company, or writing an article about them, or or reviewing the company for some other purpose. You're just kind of passing by. So I would say that you need to be there. You need to be there in social, but you also need to be there for reputational purposes. And that's what we call push versus pull. One other idea I want to share with you, and then I do want to open it up a little bit more to a discussion, is we're viewing Google now. I think in the past, and myself included, we used to look at, we think of different kinds of channels out there. We think of, there's your blog, there's your own website, then there's like different media channels that you can be involved in. You could be featured on the television, the radio. There's different kinds of print media, and all those other kind of channels. We're actually starting to see Google not as a directory or a place to find news or find information or to dig a little deeper, but we're actually thinking of Google now, and I think people are starting to think of Google as a channel in itself, meaning Google is actually an information source, not the internal, not where it takes you to, but the Google search results page itself is a channel. And what you'll find a lot of times is that people do a search and they don't leave the Google page that much, because Google is piling information right into that page. You'll see for most brands that are a bit bigger or kind of notable, you'll actually see a description of the brand, you'll see the stock quotes, you'll see key executives. A lot of the information is right on the page, and that's a trend that's continuing, that we're continuing to see, where Google itself is becoming the information source. Now, in many cases, images that you see on Google, videos are already usually on YouTube, which means Google already owns them, they're already in Google. But images that you see, like when you see a strip of images, you do an image search, Google actually has their own copy of all these images. They're not even showing you the images off of the other website. They've sucked them all up, and soon they'll suck us up too. But it's becoming maybe the most important channel, I would say. Meaning, if you're thinking about where to put some additional effort, or where you're going to get kind of the biggest bang for your buck, from our perspective, don't skip the Google channel. And it's, aside from being, it's still a directory, it's still a way to get to all the other information, but it itself is a channel. And so learning how to work there and how to optimize your messages and thinking of what are my goals and what are the opportunities to get to those goals, that's something that we're seeing as very, very important. So this is the kind of last prepared slide here, and then I want to open to discussion. And what I want to talk about, so we've got particular efforts that we're trying to further, where our brand wants people to think of us in certain ways. When we want people to look up our brand and immediately think of you're a medical company. You want people to think that that safety is very important to you. You want people to feel like you're very trustworthy. You have, and if you're a bank, you want people to also to have trust, and you want them to feel like there's accuracy and security. And there's all of us have for our brands like particular messages that we want people to understand and get. And that's why you're working with communication internally and externally. How do you actually make sure that's the message that people get? How do we kind of ensure that when I search you, I'm going to get that, like I'm going to be primed for those kinds of thoughts and those feelings? And so, this is kind of the quick cheat list, if you will. And the first one is just to utilize your content. And all of us have lots and lots of content with created content, but it's kind of like that content is in the back room a lot of times. Meaning it's on page 2, which is, they say in digital reputation management, we say that the best place to hide a dead body is on page 2 of Google, because no one looks there. So you want to utilize the content and bubble up the very best content from the nether reaches, and there are really smart ways to do that. And that's one of the things that we bring to the table, is helping you use the tools that you have and maybe additional tools to take the perfect, we don't think about Google search results or your online reputation isn't the weather. It's not something that happens to you, or it shouldn't be. It's something that you should be planning. And so we're actually creating a tool right now that behind the scenes hasn't been released, but a tool that where we will be able to, together with our clients, say, how would you like your search results to appear? well, I'd like, and what's reasonable? I'm going to have a Wikipedia page that I have. I want it to be a little higher so people see that information. I want my own website to appear right over here. And we actually are creating this kind of a mock-up tool where you just press a few buttons and it'll move the results to where you want them. And I think it's kind of powerful because it's more than the fact that I think it'll be really cool looking. I actually also think that it's empowering to say you can decide how you want to appear, and you can think about the different stakeholders that you have and how they're supposed to hear your messages. Are they supposed to see social or not? And then based on everything you create, we're going to come back and we're going to say, great, so these are the steps you have to take to get there. And I think that that's what's been missing for a lot of people. A, the understanding that I can actually affect change, and B, how do I do it? So I think that's what we bring to the table. And these are kind of more of the same, promoting the positive and earned media that you have. We find a lot of brands that we work with have a great media from maybe from last year, or from 2 months ago, or from a different market, and they're not utilizing it, meaning they're not linking to it properly, they're not promoting it, it's not appearing in Wikipedia, they haven't done it in Crunchbase, they're not tweeting it, it's not on LinkedIn. There's so many different opportunities, and if you were to do half of those things in a really organized and set manner, you would start to see some of those results make their way up. And that's like taking investments that you've already made. You've spent time, you spent resources, you got the perfect article, you got the great interview, but how do we make sure that it doesn't just play once, but we want it to play every day, right? I think that that's is something that we've seen as really useful for people. Images and video are huge. We have lots of clients that have amazing video, but it's all like kind of in the back room somewhere. It's all, you're like, oh, well, you think we should use that commercial that we produced? I'm like, yes, the commercial was perfect. It was amazing. And now I look you up online and I can't find it. I have to look for it. So presumably that 30-second clip or that 1 minute or however that was perfectly done, it actually could be working for you every day. And it's not even that hard. It's really about deciding that you want that to be there. Is this making sense to people? Making sense? Yeah? Okay. All right. Wikipedia, we mentioned a few people here said they're doing something with Wikipedia. Huge. I think we were kind of surprised. We were looking at some of the Australian brands, and we're surprised to see their brands with 500, 1,000 views per day on their Wikipedia page here in Australia. Those are really big numbers. It means that those are not searchers, those are researchers. Those are people that are a different kind of stakeholder who's really wants to know more about your brand or your company. And so that also is largely being left to like random editors who may not even know what they're talking about. And so to the extent that you can engage with the community and we can help you find smart ways to do that, that's something that's really powerful and useful. And not to mention that Google grabs lots of information from Wikipedia to show on the front page of Google search results. So we work with brands where the wrong version of their logo appears in Google prominently, and it's because the wrong version is sitting there in Wikipedia. So it's pretty straightforward. On the same note, Google Plus is a thing that a lot of companies I think have kind of written off because we know Google Plus wasn't successful as a social network. So how much effort should we put into Google Plus? But it turns out that Google Plus is a really great way to telegraph to Google, this is my company's name, here are our locations, this is my official logo, and here's the website, this is my LinkedIn, and kind of it's a hub for Google to have the right information to present about you. So that's kind of also really powerful, but I think sometimes overlooked. And so having that concerted effort to kind of focus on that, I think is really important. And then there's SEO. You're doing SEO. Take some of those SEO efforts and think about reputation management. Use the SEO that you're already doing to feed into the efforts that you're trying to accomplish, the sites that you want to see there. SEO them a little bit. Think about that also for with paid search. If you're doing paid search and you're trying to get more people to watch, you want a video to rank higher, so use some of the paid search to that and have it feed in. This is a mix. This is a mix of different kinds of tactics that are going to ultimately bring your reputation into focus. And then there's lots of technical solutions, and there's things that are where it wouldn't even make sense for your company to specialize in markup schema and Wikidata and other kinds of technical capabilities that will help you help Google kind of see your site in a more crystal clear way. And those are also things that Reputation Manager brings to the table. So I've said a whole bunch of things. I'd love to find a way to kind of engage with you guys and maybe hear some of the if maybe someone could tell us about a challenge or a question regarding things that they see online for their brand or things they see for other people's brands? Do we have any kind of, I've answered all the questions.
So I've got a more general question.
Sure.
In your sort of analysis of Australian companies, how do you think Australian companies compare in terms of online reputation management?
Yes. Sure. So we've looked at, we spend a lot of time studying companies, and we look at the Fortune 500 in the U.S., and we recently did a study of the Hang Seng Index companies, and we're actually midstream looking at the ASX 50 and kind of collating information. So I would say that the thing that we saw with the Australian companies that was a little bit different was less social appearing. In the US, we would expect there to be at least one or two social results for big brands, whether they're consumer facing or not. You would expect to see a LinkedIn page pretty prominently, and a Twitter would be very likely to be seen. And with the Australian companies, we didn't see almost any of that, which is unusual. It may point to the fact that some of these things are not being used as much as they could be. The other thing that was really interesting was the Australian companies tend to have actually more ownership of the story. They tend to have multiple properties that they own online that are not social, which is interesting. So a lot of times they'll have 3 or 4 results on the page from their own website.
Yeah.
I think it points to the fact that there's an underutilization of other channels, meaning people are focusing on their own website. They're doing a little bit of social, maybe not enough social. Wikipedia is really strong in Australia for Australian companies. I think that almost every company in the ASX 50 has I think maybe 49 out of 50 have a Wikipedia. I'd love to call the 50th one and say, hey, this is interesting. Maybe you've lost something. But look at 49 out of 50 have Wikipedia, and it's I think on average it's just about in the middle of the page. So you look at that, and I think it goes to the approach that we have also, which is it's never a good idea to look at your own brand in a vacuum. It's always good to kind of have context. And so if you're if you're a company that's in hospitality, I would definitely recommend, and that's something that we would help do as well, looking at other companies and how they appear online, because that's going to be your best indication as to how you measure up and what are the opportunities that maybe someone else is using that you aren't. In Australia, the trend that we're seeing, it seems like it feels a little wide open. It feels like if you work a little harder on social media and you actually kind of connect your properties with your social media, kind of integrate a little better, you're going to get more of your messaging across than you are now, and that's the biggest trend. The other thing is that the Sydney Morning Herald is extremely strong as a news source here, more so than you would say than a local or regional newspaper would be in the United States, even if you were in New York. Maybe because it's such a big business center or something, but it seems like it has more than you would expect, and certainly more than we're seeing, say, in Hong Kong with the local media there. It's just this one news source that seems to be much stronger than the rest.
Sam, just curiously, you said you're researching ASX, Hang Seng, etc. Have you kind of delved into the size of the digital teams that are working through this? I mean, I tend to find, especially with my companies involved, it's proportionate to the amount of resourcing you can give it. And some companies are focusing on above the line and some below the line. Digital teams, arguably, depending on the nature of the business you're working in, can be quite large or quite small, or need larger teams. Have you kind of delved into that side of it?
That's a great point. We have it, and I suspect that you're right. I suspect that it is largely a function of how much resources you're putting into it. And so if you have a smaller, and in Hong Kong, I would, based on that analysis, which I think were that kind of a thought, I would guess that their digital teams are minuscule because there isn't much going on. It's almost like they don't even realize they're broadcasting. They're putting out the website because there was a big checkbox and they wanted to make sure to put a big check in it. Largely financial. They're just thinking about the financial stakeholder. They're not thinking about maybe a Western viewer who wants to kind of feel the company as opposed to just know the numbers. But I think that's a great point. And to that point, I would say that the reason why I purposely went into all the things we do. Maybe I'll give a tiny bit about what our company, who's behind it, and what our company is. and maybe some of who our clients are without talking about their names too much. But so we're 25 people. We're based in the U.S. and we have a development center in Israel, which is substantial. Israel is great for Australia because we overlap time-wise for a couple of hours a day, in the same way that we overlap with the U.S. For a couple of hours a day. So that enables us to do live calls with clients on this side of the world and on the other side of the world. So we're kind of in the middle. The team is digital specialists, SEO type knowledge, but we've kind of converted the SEOs to this wider view, and we still maintaining all the different skill sets associated with technical optimization, with content writing, and so on. We have a Wikipedia savvy team who knows how to interact with the editors of Wikipedia, and we also have a development team that's developing tools. And so some of the tools that we're going to be launching, and you're the first to hear it. Some of the tools that we're launching, we're creating a tool that's a wiki tracker, which will kind of like Google Alerts, if people use Google Alerts. So it'll be you'll go in there in the same kind of experience, type in what you want to track, and it'll notify you daily, monthly, yearly, hourly, minutely, according to what you want, of changes to your Wikipedia page or any Wikipedia page that you're tracking, and also will tell you about spikes in traffic if there's anything unusual happening in the traffic of your Wikipedia page. So just kind of where we think that data and tracking of data is really, really important, and if we can make that useful for brands, they can make better decisions. So that's one of the tools we're working on. Another tool, which is kind of the bigger tool, is this tracking tool that we call Impact, and I'll just give you the 2-minute tour. Impact that we're looking here at McDonald's, and we're looking at as it appears in the U.S. And what you're seeing in each of these columns is a day's worth of search results. It's kind of a Google search results page smushed down and made into data. And you see the corporate site, and here's the news, and here is the Twitter with the little bird there, and then here you have the another McDonald's website, and down to and then marked in red we have a couple of news stories that are not as flattering for McDonald's. So if we were working with McDonald's, this would be something that they would be able to access on a daily basis, just to have their finger on the pulse of what's happening. But then we also would let them kind of take the bird's eye view and say, well, what happened over the last month? And you can see that yes, there was some negativity. It's kind of always been toward the bottom of the page. Again, each of these columns representing a single day. We're taking Google search results and turning them into data that you can graph and manipulate. And then looking at things like what percentage of the page of the digital reputation do they own? How are the ratings on a chart, so you can kind of get a sense of how that's progressing. And then looking at the different types of content that's there. And lastly, on this page, Wikipedia. What is the traffic to your Wikipedia page? One thing you'll notice, the Wikipedia page, the traffic tends to kind of spike on Mondays and Tuesdays, and is pretty dead on the weekends, which is a good indication that people looking at the Wikipedia page are not looking to find some food at McDonald's. They're actually researchers. They're writing an article. They want to learn more about what McDonald's is about. So McDonald's ought to be paying attention. With an average of 6,000 visitors a day to the Wikipedia page, they might want to make sure that the content there is up to date. And as far as we know, no one's really providing this kind of analytics set, and this is right now kind of something that we would be providing to Horizon. It's not yet a consumer product. We need to kind of make it a little easier to use for you guys. But we're looking at here also just looking at how the news is how often they're in the news, and where that news is appearing in Google, and then also the volatility, how much of change is going on. So if this is your brand, you really want to know all this information, because it'll as you're doing things that are effective, as you're putting content out there, you want to see, am I lowering volatility? Do I own more of the story? And so on. And then we can do things like look at across locations. It's really interesting what I've learned. So that's another reason to kind of check out and see if you do. It might have to do with the fact that you have a local office and there was some news associated with that location or something. So you want to check that out. And then lastly, and sometimes most interestingly for us who are in kind of more competitive industries, almost all of us I think have some kind of competitor or peers that we want to tear down. Peers. These are different fast food restaurants, and this is kind of interesting because if you look at all these different fast food restaurants, and this is just looking at one day of search results for across Waffle House and TGI Fridays and Taco Bell and Subway and Wendy's and so on. The interesting thing is that marked in red, you see negatives, and actually you find out that McDonald's isn't really doing that poorly compared to some of its competitors in terms of negativity and digital reputation. So it's kind of like also just providing that kind of context. I think that's that's kind of useful. But anyway, so more question. What are the biggest concerns that people would have? Is there around their brand and how they appear online? Are there areas that feel like you don't have enough control? Does anyone have?
How about social media? It's hard to control a brand through social media. What are your thoughts? Or
Absolutely, yes. So our take on that is, social media, where to be in social media is a big question, meaning there's some brands that probably shouldn't be spending all their time on Facebook because, maybe they're a B2B business and maybe Facebook isn't the right place to interact. But once you've figured out where to act and you figured out what the messaging and what you're going to do there, our biggest contribution to that conversation would be to say, how are people finding social media aside from people that are already? People that are on Twitter and they're looking for your Twitter, then they'll find it pretty easily. That's not a hard thing. But our take would be, how do you take social media and starting from the profile? What profile do you create? What kind of images do you use? Are you consistent with the brand images and so on? And what's the messaging that you're giving? And then how do we use that within your digital reputation? So Twitter is a great example, because if you tweet, it turns out that if you tweet something like 3 or 4 times a week, and your brand name is unique enough, you tend to get your Twitter box starting to appear within the search results, which means that there's a lot more traffic on your Twitter, because anybody searching your brand in Google or in Bing or anywhere else is going to start to see your Twitter results. So that's kind of the frequency of how to use it and making sure that the messaging goes with what you're trying to accomplish for your brand. That's kind of the contribution that I would make. In terms of the actual social media strategy, I would turn to the folks at Horizon and kind of learn a little more about what they can offer on that side.
You mentioned images and photos.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure, yeah. Images are really, it's interesting. We get a lot of requests from companies and they want to manage their brand online, and then we find that images can be so, people get pretty emotional about having the wrong image, particularly of an executive, or if you have an image of your brand, but it's a news reporter's version of the image. It's not the perfect shot of something, of your product or of your brand, or sometimes it's a good shot, but then you click through, it's on a bad article. So images, managing images is a little different than text, because Google doesn't exactly know whether something's a good image or it's a bad image, and they don't exactly know what it's about. So you have to give them clues. Google's algorithms know when something's a person, and they have an idea that something is a landscape. And my iPhone is pretty good at telling me that something that this is a dog, and they actually categorize your pictures, and they say, this is a dog, and this is a car, and things like that. So Google is using the same kind of technology to understand things about it. So if you have a brand search, a lot of times it knows what a logo is, typically, and versus a person or something like that. But you need to give Google clues, and the best ways to give clues are naming the image with the exact keyword that you want to appear. So if you want something to appear for your brand, you want to make sure that you name it that way. You also want to make sure that the language on the page where it is also is appropriate. You don't want to have a picture just on a web page by itself with no description. You want to make sure there's like descriptive text that is associated with keywords that you want it to appear for. Other things that are really helpful are using higher resolution versions of images. Google doesn't really like to show very low resolution pictures, so if you don't want to do something crazy, but kind of a bit bigger, and you can kind of poke around and see what Google is already showing for your brand. Make sure that you'll find it won't be like 200 by 100 images. It'll be 500 by 800. So it'll be much bigger kind of images, because then people will be able to reuse them more easily. Whether that may not be good for you, but that's what they do. And then the main thing that I would say is you want to make sure that your images are in all the right places. So you want to put your images on Wikimedia. You can submit your own images there, and then they become free source for people to use. If you want people to use an image, then put it in the places where Google is going to find it. Google Plus is a great place to put images, particularly your profile image that you want them to use for your logo or for your company. If you register a location in Google Local, you can actually submit images, and also the naming of the images. And then, I think those are the main things. The other things that we find in the US, and I don't know how the media works here, is you can actually, if you don't like images for your brand, or you don't like images for your executives, you can call the news source and say, we have an updated image to send you. Every time you cover our firm, you show the picture of the outside of our building, but it doesn't look like that anymore, and we moved, and that's not our building, and it was a bad hair day that day. So, so here's the updated image, and this is, we're just sending out to everybody. And actually, in the U.S., they will use that new image because they kind of like the interaction. It's sometimes the ability also to open a conversation and say, and by the way, the description that you have of our company on BusinessWeek.com or on your Wall Street Journal or whatever the news source is, it's kind of outdated as well. We're now in this business, so sometimes you just have to ask. And that's important as well. And the last thing I would say is that Google doesn't like to show the same image over and over again. So if I'm looking up your brand, or I'm looking up an executive, or your company name, you want to have different images, and not just slightly different. You want to have them from different perspectives. You want to have them, if it is a picture of a building, that you don't want it to be the same picture, because you really won't get it over and over again. And the same is true for text. If you have a description of your company that you're using, and this is kind of contrary to what your compliance people will tell you sometimes, they'll say, well, this is our boilerplate text, this is the way we describe our company, so keep using this. And it turns out that that's great from a legal perspective. Google doesn't like to show people the same piece of text over and over again. So your LinkedIn description of your company should not be identical to your About Us description, and should not be identical to the bio that you just put out for, or the description that you just put out for the conference that you're going to be sponsoring. It actually needs to be changed up and gone through compliance again, so that it tells it from a different perspective a little bit. Because, and what we were working with an oil company in Bahrain, and they were very concerned because their Bahrain website wasn't coming up and their UK website was. And they said, well, why don't we have both of them? The content is completely different on these websites. And when you look up our brand, you only find one of them and not the other. And we said to them, well, we think that it's, even though everything is completely different, the About Us is identical, meaning the main paragraph is identical word for word. And they said, yeah, well, that's our description. I said, you need to change it up, and literally they did eventually change it up. When they did, it wasn't 24 hours before Google knew about the page. It wasn't going to show it because they're not going to show you two pages that are identical. It's a bad experience, right? One of the ways we think about Google is you think about, you go into a supermarket. I don't know if they do this here, but in the U.S. you go into a supermarket or a convenience store, and they have all the different types of cold drinks, and they'll have them set up in a very, very specific manner. I once saw on the side they actually have a little map. It says put the Diet Cokes on the top and the waters on the bottom and the fruit juices kind of in the middle, and it's this whole elaborate setup, and it's all set up to maximize satisfaction or purchasing. And it turns out that you don't necessarily put the best things at the top and the worst things at the bottom. There's like a kind of, they did multivariate testing to find the very optimal place to put each kind of item. They actually have the Diet Coke both on the top and also on the bottom, I think, in some of these, which my wife would be very happy about. She loves that. I should love that. But what happens is that Google is the same way. You have this search results page, and they don't show the very best thing necessarily at the top. They show everything in the optimal spot. And so we need to think about what are the ways that we can get the right pieces of content that we've already created a lot of times into the optimal spot. So you always have to think about a search result and look at the search results and say, what's not there, what's missing. It's a kind of a harder thing to see, is the thing that's not there. What could be there? And how does doing that give a better experience? And then all of this, the undertone of the kind of below the surface, everything I'm saying is to say Google has things figured out pretty well, and we're going to help them help them show our brand in a way that's reasonable for Google. It's none of this is about how do we subvert the algorithm, how do we hoodwink them or fool them into showing something they wouldn't want to show. So I hope that kind of comes out, and that is very good for you as a brand. It's very good for us as well, and for our partners at Horizon, because we're not thinking about cat and mouse with Google, and I think that's a poor idea. They're pretty smart. They have more money than most of the countries that we live in. So I think that idea of it's powerful, it's this fast-moving train. Let's get on. Let's figure out what they're trying to do, and let's help them do it. And the good news is that when I speak at events where Google is present, they'll almost always call me over and they go, "That's really interesting. They go, we like this, because you're not telling people to fight it. You're saying jump on board. You're saying you don't like the images that you're seeing there. Provide more and tag them right, and just tick everything off. Tick every check all the boxes. Do everything you're supposed to do, and that's that's the value we provide. So one thing I did mention is the kind of companies we work with. So we work with insurance companies and banks and healthcare companies and hospitality and a lot of kind of crazy rich people. That's just high net worth individuals who want to be seen a particular way, and just really the same principles pretty much apply regardless of the industry. But we need to become aware of the industry, kind of like we don't go into a new project without understanding who are the peers, who are the competitors, what are the trends that are happening there, and that includes if we're in a new country, a country where we have very few clients, we need to learn what's normal for them. Does that? I hope that makes sense. Yeah. More questions, comments, concerns, criticisms?
Sam, I've got a question. You talked a lot about building a brand online. What happens if you've got a client whose reputation is bad online? How long does it take to rebuild that and get it up from a positive perspective? I mean, we might be on the front page, but it's all bad.
Right.
How do we shift that around, and how long does it take in your experience?
Yeah. So the good news is that that we can start to see progress typically within a couple of weeks, meaning like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. My staff in the office likes to say, "Don't say that. Say 4 weeks, and we'll shock them with 2." And but the actual fact is that about 2 or 3 weeks, and that's usually because they this perspective that says rather than saying. I think the client in that situation is looking at it and saying, we have negativity there, the sky is falling, run for cover, and we look at it and we say, there's a ton of opportunities here. Which opportunity should we take first? And it can be annoying to the client because they're like, you're not in a candy store, calm down. But the truth is that there's almost always things that can be done in Wikipedia, in Google+, on their own website, mini sites, social media. There's almost always efforts that can be taken within a short period of time, a week or two, that will already start to move the needle. Typically, crisis situation, 3 or 4 negative articles have crept their way up or have been there for a while. We're talking about several months to really start sunsetting those articles. And it's because we're going to need to be helping promote the new content, or existing content that you already have that maybe is lower down. So there's ongoing efforts that are required, but the short answer is 2 to 3 weeks to start to see a measurable change, and then all along the way it's measurable change, meaning you're getting reports on a weekly basis that say this is where you were, this is where you are now, and it's dynamic. It's not things are. Meanwhile, we know this. We go into an account. We know that there's new news, and now we care about this, and that guy just left the company, and this one just came to the company. So it's all very, very dynamic. But the typical thing is that it's measured in months, weeks to start to see progress, and then steady progress along the way. Typically, after if it's a 3 or 4 or 5 month project, it's usually about in the last month that you have the stragglers. You have 1 or 2 results that are maybe a little bit stronger, and there's extra push that's needed. And it's not us off somewhere doing work without you. There's engagement. They're working, and the partnership with a PR firm is crucial for us. We can't. I don't want to use the expression they use in the U.S., but you can't make chicken salad without chicken. I'll say. There's another expression. You need things to work with, and so you need to have content. You need to have social media if that's appropriate. You need to be engaging with the media itself, your own content, earned content, and so on. And then we can take all that and kind of bring that into light. Does that make sense?
Sam, you might want to maybe expand on that and talk about the example that we worked on a couple of years ago, because it was multiple search engines really coming from a zero base in terms of content.
Yeah.
And it was a 10-month program, and what you were able to achieve in partnership with me back then.
Yeah. So Jamie and I were working with a businessman and a business that had multiple countries and even multiple languages. It was former Soviet Union, and there was a Singapore aspect. I think there was UK as well, and then generally kind of just Google.com. And the results in different places were very different. We were fortunate enough to be working with Jamie's team, and they were creating content. And actually, I think that the challenge there was, how do we take that content that's being created that tells the story and makes sure that people are seeing it. And so, as you said, it was a dynamic situation as well, because new news was coming out, and there was different issues in different locations. In the UK, they were very concerned about a land purchase, and somewhere else there was an oil issue, and so that was a nice way of saying it, right? It was an oil issue. Oil can be an issue. I think we've all had that. So the tanker, so taking those different locations and looking at each one and finding the characteristics and looking for the opportunities to push that content forward. And some of the work ended up being behind the scenes. It ended up being looking at things like Wikidata, which is the kind of a database that, like Wikipedia, is editable by all, but it's kind of mysterious. It's the ability to connect a company's corporate page to their Wikipedia page, to their social media properties, to the best articles about them. So doing that kind of content, kind of putting all the pieces together, or curating the content, if you will, curating the way that a brand is seen, was, in this case, did take something like 10 months. And the good news was that over that time, you would see in different locations, different speeds of response by Google, if you will, but steady progress across. And we're not magicians who come along and wave our wand and everything just gets better. I would say that any kind of solution that you get like that probably isn't going to be long lasting. And so the way we work with clients tends to be on an intense period of several months, where we help achieve the specific goals and opportunities. It might be taking your brand and getting it initially to where you want it to be, not because you have a crisis, but just because you want to make sure that the brand story is being told. You want to be proactive and preventative as well. And that maybe the biggest value we give to brands is just helping them prevent being in a situation where bad news comes out and that news just goes right to the top. And I think we've all seen brands where, or individuals or companies where something happens that's negative or different, and suddenly that's the only story about them. And that might not be bad if that was there for a day, but that tends to be there for forever until they deal with it. So much preventative measures like owning the story of your brand and kind of putting all the pieces in the right places will help you sleep at night. Because you know that if should there be a crisis or a negative article, it's not going to sabotage your brand completely. It'll appear and you'll deal with it. Does that kind of make sense?
I think, Sam, one of the things we discussed yesterday too was in that sense of, it's not about sort of also whitewashing, getting rid of it, because, we live in the real world and there's a whole lot of different places people get information, but having the majority of it being your key messages, but also having some of it which is from other influencers, might be, not 100% positive, but, say 80 to 90% positive, it actually makes it a bit more real, doesn't it? And so it puts the influencers as part of that conversation as well, which is also really
well. They're going to. The thing is, they're going to be there.
Yeah.
So you might as well have to choose which ones you want there. Wikipedia is a good example of that. We have a client who where a Wikipedia page hadn't existed about them, and it's being created not by us. We had suggested maybe you guys want to get rid of Wikipedia, but someone else beat us to it before the company said, well, we're not really ready for it, we're not sure. So we started creating content for a potential Wikipedia page, but someone else beat us to it, launched a Wikipedia page, and it was an opportunity for us to say to the client, hey, they've just launched this page, it's a skeleton of a page, why don't we come along with some content that mentions your challenges as well as your successes? And they were like, what? You're going to mention this issue that we had? We said, absolutely, in a factual way, in one sentence within the history section of your company. That's a perfect idea, because that's actually smart, because we've covered it. And so a new editor coming along and saying, controversy, was like, well, we've already covered it. There's a whole sentence about it. It's all accurate and it's all there. So it's actually sometimes, and this was, and that's what we did. And it was, and in fact, that's how it stayed, meaning the sentence is in there and we don't know what could have happened, but I think that most people would rather have a factual sentence that said there was an issue over here and this is how it was resolved, than to have a controversy section. And the same is true for your Google search results, meaning if there's an issue, deal with the issue. This is how we got past that issue, because it kind of like nothing to see here. Let's move on.
Sam, just with regards to issues of crisis management,
Sure.
look, depending on the resistance that different people get from their MDs or their CEOs, what advice would you give to a CEO who's relied on traditional PR to basically cover his issues of crises, I should say, and then convince them to then spend, and once again it's based around resource for me, get them to spend on social listening tools, and then address the appropriate loud conversations, if you will. I'm just kind of interested in your experience there with some of the people that you've worked with, what kind of resistance you get from them, and how you've overcome that, because it is an ask. They're looking for, they're going to look for tactical outcomes and what's immediately in front of them, rather than in often cases building their reputation over a longer term. They're here for 3 or 4 years. Beyond that, they don't care. So they only see what's in front of them. So what have you found to be effective, I guess?
So I think the most effective thing that we can do, and we can aid in that, is the use of data. I think that if you telling people that they should do something, and telling them, well, my experience has been, I worked with 10 companies and we did this and it was very effective. That's, I think, not as useful as saying, let me show you the data. Let's look at the brand that you care about. Let's look at, and let's see what the situation is now. Let's look at some peers, competitors. I think that's very effective. And then maybe choosing the ones that really shine, and then pointing to what they've done. I think that if you do that and you say, you see how they've used social media to kind of preempt this over here, they're addressing this issue in this way, or you see how they've got multiple social media channels. They're looking at recruitment through one of the social media channels, and in another one they're aiming at a particular group of people or consumers, or and you show them that. If that doesn't convince them, then I don't think you're going to be convinced.
I was going to say, like, when you talk about more channels, you're actually probably scaring them more, because it's more resource if they've got to apply to each different channel.
I hear you.
And so you just
Well, some of the channels. So maybe you start small and you say you know what, this is let's take out of these 7 competitors. Let's look at all their kind of data in all in a chart. There's something about taking all the data, just putting it right down, and you're pointing to it and saying, you see what they've done over here. You see how they're getting a big effect, a big impact of that. Let's find the 1 or 2 things that we could do to get the most benefit that would match what they're doing. And then and obviously start small. What we find is almost everybody who works with us starts because they see an opportunity or they see an issue, and we deal with that issue opportunity. If they get what they need out of it and it's really useful and effective, I think that what they find is that the resources required it's an add-on to what they're doing in PR. It's an add-on to how they're engaging the media, because arguably you get an amazing interview on Bloomberg. That's amazing. Your PR firm did a great job. And now you're on Bloomberg, and the company's being shown in the best way possible. But then when it stops, 24 hours later, they're not showing that interview anymore. So the ability to take that interview and have it sit at number 3 on the page for the next year for your brand, or for around the issues that you were talking about, that's arguably it's a reason to work with your PR firm more to get those stories, because they're going to be much more longer lasting. It's a reason. You're just taking resources that you're already putting in. By putting in a bit more, you're getting arguably 10 times the value. So if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. But if you show them the proof and you show them what other people are doing, and that lights up for them, then usually there's usually some version of a service that we can give a company that will give them the small, medium, large. We only want to do taking some of the media and making it more impactful. We're not ready to do a Wikipedia program. We're not ready to move fully into something else. Is that kind of answer it? Easier said than done.
Very much so.
Okay. I would fill out the lottery and use some of the winnings.
Sam, what about maintaining it after you guys come and do 3 to 5 months, whatever it is? What about after that? What happens?
So typically we offer a maintenance program which is a lot less resource hungry, and oftentimes it'll be a half to or a third, even as low as a third, if it's really maintaining and monitoring. But it's more than that. It's always monitoring and maintaining, but there's also the typical clients. You're not in a static situation. There's new news coming out, so we're the team that's sitting there going, okay, great, new news came out. PR was this and so on, and okay, how do we get that the most play? How to link to it? How should you tweet it? We're just kind of that extra team that's sitting on the side, ready to help you as things come. So most companies do choose to do some sort of monitoring, maintenance, and we usually try to find a price point which matches the level of activity that we need and is makes it attractive for you guys and worthwhile for us.
If you're in a startup situation, so not so established in terms of content or presence, and you're still trying to get your brand out there, still trying to build the base of reputation, and you're actually still trying to do your videos and photos and all that sort of good stuff as well. Is there a priority that you would recommend, or a particular avenue that you'd focus on first? Because you've mentioned many platforms, but obviously based on resources, you need to be quite smart about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. You need to have your own website in place. You need to be thinking about the keywords that people. I mean, the most important thing is, we'll start with this. It needs to be possible to find your company and to find information about the executives, and that people, when they do find it, they think the right things. It's clear what industry you're in. There's the tricky part with a startup is some of the platforms won't make as much sense. You're not ready for Wikipedia if you're a startup typically, because you won't be considered notable enough for that. So you put that off. I think Google Plus is really fast to get profiles into LinkedIn, Google Plus. Not to necessarily use those platforms very much, but just to register them. Twitter, register it, and put your description there, and then link everything up. That would be the first steps I would take. And then I would start to, and the same thing with YouTube. I would, even if you don't have video, just grab the YouTube channel for your name, for your brand name, and just kind of lock that up. The last thing you want is to have to get into an argument with someone who decided to squat on the same name that you wanted. And it's sometimes possible to wrestle it away from them, but it's the last thing you want to spend your time doing.
Yeah.
I'll be exhausted with questions. Yes.
Yeah. Well, look, guys, we were going to have. I think we've kind of really done our Q&A, really, which has been fantastic. And thank you all for participating, and hopefully that you walk away with some new insights into the world of online reputation management. I think you can see from what everybody knows and does, and that how the merging of the traditional stuff that's still happening, whether it's in a crisis, we're still doing the traditional stuff, but we have to be being really cognizant of what's happening in that online world and marry the two pieces up so that we get the best bang for buck, whether we're in a building a brand situation, whether we're in a crisis situation, or whether we were doing some sort of key stakeholder engagement, so that all those key influencers that often we're engaging with in the offline world, we also need to be engaging with in the online world, and they need to be in the right place when people are looking for information about us. So thank you all for coming along this morning. Thank you, Sam, for a great presentation. Please feel free to have another coffee, have a chat, whatever. And as I said, Sam's around for the next couple of days. He's going to be here this morning, so if anybody wants to grab him, do so. Or if you want to tee up something in terms of us coming over to have a more detailed chat with you while he's here, that'd be great. But when he's gone, that doesn't mean we lose all his knowledge. It's all... we're sort of sifting it all through, and then we'll be in touch with him on Skype, and he'll be back too. So thank you again, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.